Hi, my name is Sergio. I'm a 3D artist with over 5 years of experience making games, and in this video we're going to learn how to make a master material in Unreal Engine that makes use of masks. So let's get started. Okay, so before we start, I want to let you guys know this is going to be more for a simplified or stylized material. And right now I'm in a third person template, and I've just made a few folders for the textures and the materials. I just have 4 textures here that I'm going to be using. And then in my materials folder, I'm going to right click and press material. And I'm going to call this material M underscore master mask. And then I'm going to go and open that up. And the first thing I want to do is get my UVs and my color settled. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to type texture coordinates. And this is going to be my UV, my U and V tiling for my texture. And then from there, I'm going to make a scalar parameter. I'm pressing 1 and left clicking to do that. And then I'm going to right click on this and convert it to a parameter. And I'm going to name it UV tiling. I'm going to click on it and press 1 for the default value. So if we multiply by 1, it's just going to equal whatever it is already, which is 1. So we'll always have at least 1 UV tiling. And then I'm going to multiply that. I'm pressing M and then left clicking. And I'm dragging that in here. So I can multiply the UV tiling and change that whenever I want. So if I want it to tile more, I can just change this value since it's a parameter. And the way that works is, if I use my snipping tool here as an example, whenever you have a tiling material, the right and left side tile perfectly together, and then the same for the bottom and the top, right? And this top square would be 1 UV tiling. And then if we did 2 in the U and the V, or if we multiplied it by 2, we would have 4 squares, and then 3 squares, and then 4, etc. And then V is for vertical, up and down. So if you wanted to just put a 1 for the V or whatever, you could do that. And then U would be left and right. Okay, from there, I'm going to drag out and I'm going to go to a named reroute node. And I'm going to call it UV and press enter. And that's just the same as adding a dot, but instead of having to have lines go through, we can just drag that into here. And I'm going to change the color to like a pinkish purple. And I'm going to add a texture sample. I'm going to texture sample. I'm going to turn this into a parameter actually. And I'm going to call this, let's just call it mask. And then we're going to get this UV by right clicking and going into our named reroutes and clicking on UV here and dragging that in. So now instead of like going like this and adding a dot, we can just do this. And it just becomes a lot cleaner. So I'm going to actually comment this out and call this UV. And then I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to call it masks. And I'm going to drag this out. And from here, I'm going to keep adding more named reroutes. I'm going to go named reroute. I'm going to call this mask underscore R for red. And then we're going to do that again, named reroutes, mask underscore G. Another one here, named reroute, mask underscore B. And then I'm going to color code these just so it's easier to look at. I'm going to use the eyedropper to click on this. Same with this one. And then same with this one. Cool. So now that we have those, we can just move those over here. And I want to add some more parameters. I'm going to press the 3 key on my keyboard and then left click to make a vector parameter. I'm going to do that 3 times. because we're gonna be tinting each and every one of these masks with a color that we decide. And we're gonna turn these into parameters. So I'm gonna right click, convert to parameter. Let's call this base color tint underscore R for the red mask. That's what we're tinting. And then let's do that over here. I'm just going to copy this name and put it in here. I'm going to call this the G. And then convert this to a parameter and do it one more time for the B. And again, to make things easier, I'm just going to make this more of a blue. I'm going to make this more of a green. And make this more of a red. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our named reroute nodes, and we're going to get the B mask, the G mask, and the R mask. And let's put that in the right place like this. And what we're going to do is multiply each of those by the colors that we have. So I'm going to re-multiplies here. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I'm just highlighting everything and pressing Q so the lines are nice and straight. And then what we're going to do with that is we're going to move this a little bit over. We're going to go right click and type add to add these in. So what I'm doing is, since mask R is a black and white mask, I'm multiplying that black and white mask by a color. So everything that's white inside of that mask is going to be multiplied by this color, and that's going to add red, or whatever this color is to be, inside of those white areas and ignore the black areas. Same here. And then same for the blue. And then we're adding all those together to make up this texture. So we're going to do one more add. We're going to add the combination of those with the combination of the blue. And then that's going to go straight into our base color. And let's comment this out as base color tint. So I'm going to use a texture here. I've named my texture wrapping paper. So I'm going to click that and put that there so that error goes away. And for this texture, just to show you an example of what's happening, if I turn off the green and blue, in the red channel we have white wherever that mask is to be, and then in the green channel white for wherever that's supposed to be. Same for the blue. For a texture like this where you're not actually using the RGB for color, you might want to click on this and go to masks, no sRGB, so it turns off sRGB and it compresses it properly. And then if you don't have an alpha, you might want to tick this on as well and save that. So that's what that's doing. Quick side note, if you haven't made a mask like this before, you can always use the red, green, and blue colors, the pure ones, in an image editing software like Photoshop. Or you can bring in a black and white mask into the red, green, and blue channels over here. If you're comfortable using something like Designer, you can also use an RGBA merge to merge your black and white masks into one singular texture like this one, and then export that out. And then from there, we're getting these three masks. And if you wanted to see what that looks like here again, you can right click and press start previewing node, and you can see exactly what that mask looks like. Same for this one. Start previewing, and then start previewing. And then you can stop previewing by right clicking and doing that. So that's what we're multiplying these colors by, and then it's going into here. So that's our UVs and color setup. So let's see what we can do with that so far. From there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my master mask material, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to create a material instance. And I'm just going to call this 01 for now. I'm not sure what to name it. And then we're going to drag that onto something here. So I'm going to drag that here. Right now we can't see anything, so we double click on that and we change our material property over. Oh, that's the wrong place. We've got to apply and save so that we can see what's going on. So right now it's just using that those colors that we had originally, and we don't want that. We want to be able to change the colors. So those parameters we have earlier, like the UV tiling, we can change that to make it tile more or less. So we want it to be like way bigger, we could. I'm just going to leave it as a 1 for now. And then if you wanted to, you could drag a different mask into there. So I have this other one as an example, right? If you wanted to. And then we can change all of these colors to be whatever colors we want. So that's so far what you can do with these masks. You can make, for example, a Christmas present or a bunch of different colored Christmas presents with different wrappers. And then we're going to add some more customizability to this in a second. One thing I'd like to do real quick is add some random color variation to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is just move this over because we need a little bit more space. And then from there, I'm going to get another texture sample. And then I'm going to use just the wind noise from the template as an example. And we're going to, again, grab that named reroute UV node so we don't have to drag that line all the way over from here, which would not be clean. And then we're going to lerp, which is a linear interpolate, between these colors and these colors. With an alpha, we're going to make a parameter. So if I right click on this and convert to parameter, I can type this and press make it base color variation. And then I'm just going to put the default value at like a 0.05. We don't want it to be too strong. And you can see an example of it working right now if I turn it to 0.5 and I plug this in. It's sort of blending between those two variations of color. I want it to be very subtle, just so it's not just one plain color. And that's already looking a little bit better. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit again, and I'm going to call this the base color variation. And then from there, the next thing I want to do is go into making a mask for the roughness. So to do that, we're just going to grab these again. I'm going to left click and drag, copy and paste these over here. And all we're going to do is I'm pressing 1 and left click to make 3 more scalar parameters. And I'm going to call this one, just convert these to parameters real quick. I'm going to call this one roughness underscore R. I'm going to control C and control V so I can put R, G, and B. And we're going to multiply these. Again, I'm M and then left clicking to do that. We're going to multiply these values together. I'm going to set the default value to something like 0.8 for the roughness on all of these, because a roughness value of 1 would be completely rough and not shiny at all, and 0 would be completely shiny. I'm selecting these all and pressing Q so that they're a little bit more straight. And then from there, we're going to do the same thing we did with the color, and we're just going to add these on top of each other. So add. So we're adding the result of this one to that one, and then the result of those two with this to create our roughness. And we might want to clamp this to make sure none of the pixel values are above a 1 since we're adding pixel values on top of each other. And then we can drag this straight into our roughness. I'm going to comment this out as roughness. And I'm going to press apply and save. And that material we were playing with earlier now, we have some more values to mess around with that we can make sections shinier or less shiny. It's kind of hard to see with this lighting. But you can see a little bit of the reflections here. So if I put 0 for everything, it's going to be fully shiny, and you'll see the reflections there. But if I put it back to like a 1, you won't see the shininess anymore. So that's how you can change the roughness values of each sections of your mask. So now let's move on to doing the same thing for the metallic. For the metallic, you can honestly just Control C and Control V this. And I'm going to call this metallic. And we just have to make sure that we change the names of all 3 of these parameters. Otherwise, it's going to overwrite these because the names need to be different. I'm just going to Control C this again so it's easier. And then F2 to rename, and then Control V and E. And then we can drag this into the metallic. And if you wanted to, you could rate those named reroute nodes so that these lines aren't crossing, but for speed, I'm not going to worry about that for now. I'm going to save that, and then we can play with this again. Now we can turn on the metallic options, and we can say we want all of it to be fully metallic and then fully rough, and we'll see how that looks. But you can say, oh, I want the B section to be fully rough and have 0 metallic. So we have sections that are metallic on our Christmas wrapping present, and then sections that are not. And you can also, since we can duplicate this, and we can make another version. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this over here, and I'm going to drag this on here. And if I double click onto that one, I can make a completely different version with completely different colors. And we can have a bunch of different Christmas presents. And then we can move on to normals as well, and roughness variation. Okay, from there, what I'd like to do is add a little bit of roughness variation. So the first thing we're going to do is grab this UV so that we can tile it the same way that ours is being repeated. We're going to drag this texture in here as an example. I'm just going to tile the UVs the same way. You could make a separate UV for this if you want to tile it differently, but let's just stick with this for now. And then we're going to lerp it, so linearly interpolate it between here and here. And we're going to promote this value to an alpha. So I'm going to call this roughness variation. And let's leave it at 0 for default. And now we have a parameter where we can multiply by this roughness variation that leads into our roughness. So let's see what that looks like. If we drag it over here and we look at our masked material here, I'm going to turn the roughness variation option on for this. If we turn the value up, we'll see a little bit of that roughness variation coming through, and all it's doing there is multiplying these black and white values by whatever was here, and whatever is more black is going to be more shiny at the end once it gets into here. So for the normal, we could mask it the same way we're doing this, so we could have different normals for each section, but for this tutorial, since it seems pretty obvious how to do that from these 2 examples, I'm just going to drag this in. And again, I'm going to grab this UV here. I'm going to drag it into here. I'm going to get the flat normal node. And this can help you increase or decrease your normal strength. And I'm going to convert this to a parameter. I'm going to call it normal intensity. We might want to call it flatness, since the higher it is, the less it is, I think. But for now, let's just put it in here. into the normal, and we'll just add a normal reroute node for this here, and I'm going to comment it out as normal and comment this out as roughness variation. And again, I like to sort of color code everything. And then I'm going to press apply and save. And that can be our final master material. So right now, this normal, you might want to tile some more actually, since it seems a little bit noisy, but let's just leave it at that. What we can do actually is just make the normal a little bit less strong, since I don't like how it looks. We can turn the normal intensity down to like a 0.5. And there you have it. Another example could be by dragging these out and making another master material instance. I'm going to make a new one, and I'm going to call it number 3 as an example. Just going to drag that on there. What I want to do for this one is actually for the mask, I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose this different option so we can see what that one looks like too. And then we can change the color of these as well. So you can just make a bunch of these masks and make a bunch of different colored Christmas presents, or wallpapers, or tablecloths, or curtains. You could use it for pretty much anything. Anything simple, that is. So you can have a bunch of different variations. And then from there, the last thing I want to show is sort of organizing those parameters inside of your material, your master material, so it's a little bit more easy to work with inside of the material instance. So the first thing I want to do is under here, under the group, for anything that's a parameter, I'm going to, for instance, name this 02 dash or underscore mask. And then for the UV tiling, I'm going to name this one, this parameter group. I'm going to call this 01 underscore UV. And then what that's doing, if I apply and save, if I look into here, we have these 2 different tabs for each section, for the sections we just did. That sort of separates these things. And I'm going to go in here and do that for everything. I spelled UV wrong here, so let's fix that. And then these are also parameters, so let's go to base color as a group. So let me put 03 underscore base color. I'm going to copy that and paste it, so it's just a little bit easier. And then I'm going to put this in that base color group as well. Then for these, we can put into 04 metallic. And then we can fast forward through this actually. And there we have it. We can see that we have a tab for UVs, the mask, the base color, the metallic, the roughness, and this just, again, keeps everything more organized so that you can change the versions of your materials more nicely. And then you might want to also, instead of leaving these in the master material, make a folder for wrapping paper, and you might want to move everything into that. So your master material has its own place, and you can make a bunch of master materials from inside of here. And then you can make those instances their own sections. So if you had one that was for wrapping paper and one that was for a tablecloth, you could do that. Cool. Hope you learned some things and find more creative ways to use these materials. Hopefully now you have a better idea of how versatile master materials and material instances can be, and how you can use masks to sort of make that a lot more customizable.